I remember that night, and I will always remember it. I was watching TV together with my dad. We had been waiting for hours and hours, drinking coffee, trying to stay awake. I felt like dozing off. I felt my eyes sliding down, but I had to stay awake for this heroic moment. Then, when Barack Obama, as the first elected black president of the United States of America, rose to the stage, tears started falling down my eyes. And my father was citing, "This is it. This is it. Agieren. Finally. Alhamdulillah. Hallelujah. God is great." And he started dancing. My mother woke up. My sister rose from her bed. And together as a family, we watched Barack Obama giving his memorial speech. Yet, the words of my dad are the words I really remembered. And he looked at me closely in my eyes and said, "This is it, Monique. This is it. If a black, half-blooded Kenyan can become president of the United States, you as a colored, half-Arab woman can become prime minister of this country." And I felt like my dad that night was actually transferring some of his aspirations to me. And he was saying, this is a new time. And I realized that my dad perhaps was too old for this new time, but I was young enough to live it. And I know that night, millions and millions of people all over the world were celebrating. What am I saying? I think billions of blacks, of coloreds, of Latinos, of Asians, Muslims and Christians. They were celebrating, feeling this new sense of hope. And I know that here, back in the Netherlands, tens of thousands, perhaps even hundreds of thousands of people were celebrating and cherishing and encouraging themselves. From the Turkish shop owner at Maastricht to the newly arrived exchange student in Groningen. From the Iraqi barber in Rotterdam to the Suriname businessman at the Zuidas. Yet looking at Dutch politics today, there's still no such thing as a female prime minister. Let's stand a colored one. We haven't seen ministers with Turkish background or Arab roots. Nor did we witness any minister with ex-colonial ties, such as from Suriname or Indonesia, even though we have hosted huge communities of them for over 50 years now. Now, if we look at the Dutch media, fortunately it's a little bit more diverse. Yet if the Dutch talk shows and entertainment programs would be a picture of Dutch society anno 2013, one would still think that the Dutch society is predominant, white, liberal, secular, with stronger and stronger right-wing tendencies. Same counts for the ads, the editorials, the newspaper articles, and the leading popular magazines. Did you see the covers? It seems like Wassenaar and Laren and the Amsterdamse grachtengordel and Hilversum are all over the place. But now, if you go to the streets, you'll find them more and more diverse. Just go check any playground at any random primary school. You'll find the full rainbow color nation playing with each other, teasing each other, running around like there's no such thing as xenophobia, like there's no such thing as Islamophobia, like this country isn't hijacked by polarization and discrimination. But there is. Go check the same kids when they changed the little primary schools for secondary education. The rich kids standing with the rich kids. The blacks are apart. The mokro flavor isn't mixing with Turkish delight. And you will find some of them drinking Coke, while others prefer Pepsi, and they won't change brands. Some of them have Adidas and other Nike, and some of them can hardly afford any brand at all. Being raised in a mixed family with a Dutch mother and an Egyptian father, I had a daily diet of Martin Luther King and Nelson Mandela, Gandhi and the stories of Gamal Abdel Nasser. My father rose me with the hope of a migrant who works hard to provide his two girls with a better future. He tried everything in the hope that we will not be judged by our skin color or the illiteracy of our grandmother, but that we will be embraced for our qualities that we possess. But yet my parents were also very much aware of discrimination we have in this country. And so they decided to change my name, Monique Samuel, for Monique Samuel. Suddenly I wasn't Egyptian, but slightly Jewish, and my name was more Dutch than anything else. While my parents were moving up the ladder of success, we changed neighborhoods and I arrived at middle-class schools. When it was time for me to hit secondary education, I enrolled at a Dutch Free Reformed, all-white, all-Orthodox Christian school. Suddenly I was the first student out of 5,000 to be the allochtoon, and I was the only one. Back home, my father kept on teaching me on the boxing skills of Muhammad Ali. He would share his youth stories of Egypt. He would raise me with the dreams of Anwar Sadat and talk about the voice of Cairo. But my fellow students didn't understand my passion for Egypt. They didn't understand my love for this country. And they would keep on telling me, why do you always have to talk about this country? Why do you always have to talk and show that you're different? I didn't understand. For me, Holland and Egypt stood alongside each other. They were fighting inside me, yet dancing passionately at the same time. And I wanted to cherish my two cultures. I wanted to cherish these different identities. And I wanted actually to share the stories with my fellow students, as much as I wanted the whole Netherlands to share and cherish its many different social and cultural identities. But I witnessed the opposite instead. And then 9/11 happened. Yes, I'm a post-9/11 kid. And I was in the middle of it all. Suddenly, I could have been the daughter of Muhammad Atta, that Egyptian terrorist. Muslim and Christian students were fighting in the yard of my school. Boys called Mehmet and Ali were asking me why I was with them, those crusaders at my school, while my fellow students were calling me names like Mummy, Pharaoh, Moor, Muslim, or simply terrorist. And they start talking like, Monique, why do you always have to stress your differences? You're simply part of us. You don't belong to them. But for me, something like us and them didn't exist. And I still don't know what it means, although I keep on hearing it. I have never belonged to a group, to no single group. I was born and raised a migrant kid, yet my mother was born in Schiedam. I'm an Arab, yet I don't consider Muhammad my prophet. I'm a Christian, but gay. I have a visual disability, but I don't have a wheelchair, and I try not to look nerdy, so most people don't understand or realize. We have so many identities. We are much more than a single identity, yet I feel constantly pushed to embrace one identity and give up some other. That doesn't only count from my cultural background, it also counts from my sexual orientation, for example. When I tell people I'm Christian and gay, I always get the same question. How can you be Christian and gay? Both Christians and gays ask. How can you call yourself Arab, whereas you are not a Muslim? Both my Arab and non-Arab friends ask. Why do you always stress your color? Well, you could be perfectly white. Go back to your own country. But what would that be? Go forget your other country. But which country should I forget? We have so many identities, so many shared identities. There's much more than this one single identity. Yet it seems like we only live in groups, and we are not one person, but a group. And we do things accordingly to our group. And our groups are based on some identity, like a job, a daily profession, religion, sexual orientation, or ethnic background. We are actually so much used to look at the differences that we can hardly see what we share in common. This already starts with our educational system, in which we learn that a theory can only be just if falsified. So we look at the black swan among all the white swans, just as Karl Popper has taught us, while we forget we are all swans, no matter our color, no matter what we do. And I say, enough. Enough of these simplicities. It's time to break through the walls and lines and squares and boxes in which we try to fit everything and everyone. It's time to break through and be the leaders and lead our politicians out of the vicious circles they've trapped themselves into simply because they failed to be the leaders we so desperately need, and they failed to bring together those that they have first so deeply divided. It's time to break through the phobias, the homophobia, Islamophobia, sexism, and I don't know what else. Enough with these phobias. The only phobia we should have is the fear of our emotions, feelings, and thoughts being hijacked by one of these phobias ever again. You might not have much in common with this small shop owner of a little grocery store with strange spices and flavors somewhere in your street. This shop owner that migrated from the Moroccan Rif mountain area 35 years ago. You might disagree with his religious views, disapprove of his wife's headscarf. You might distaste his food, although it's great, I promise you. You might actually even be afraid for his son hanging with the gang out of the street at night. But never forget, you're both citizens of the same country, which you love, although you might not admit you do. You might live in the same city, the same neighborhood perhaps, reading the same newspaper and watching the same 8 o'clock news at night. You might both be struggling with raising a kid in these hybrid times. You might actually be both a huge fan of Shakespeare or admire the Chinese wall. You might have the same perspective and values attached to being a man, a father, a husband, a citizen. Yes, you might share this and much more if you would simply talk and stop thinking in he and me and she and I, but we, together, with all our different flexible identities. I have a dream that a small boy called Muhammad can grow up in this country, in this nation, and portray himself as a leader, as a prime minister perhaps, that he is encouraged at school to be a role model, that he can have friends in all the different groups, in all different parts of society, that he can have a blonde girlfriend later on or be openly gay, that he can play with my daughter raised by two moms of different backgrounds and different origin, that he never has to worry about cultural ties and different religions, and that he would never think of himself as a kut Marokkaan. That he can grow up being anything he wants to be, as a completely respected and loved human being, and that he can share a Coke with his name boldly printed on the label tag, and not Mark or Matthias instead. I also have this dream for Letitia, a small girl growing up in the Bijlmer, who is trying to be an actress, but finds herself always playing the nurse instead of the doctor, not being the prime minister, but the secretary perhaps, not being able to play a professor, but a junkie in the street. She feels like she's an exotic attraction when she goes to a small village one day. I want this girl to raise up in a peaceful family, and not a broken one, without criminals running around her. Her boyfriend staying legit, and not being pushed to get a baby just to prove her womanhood. I want this Letitia to grow up in a society where she never, ever has to worry about her skin color 1 day, 1 minute of her life. I want to share a Coke with this Muhammad and Letitia and see both the names on the label tag. And I want to bake a chocolate chip crumble cookie out of these little crumbs that we are. We are a small country full of little crumbs, tasteful, yet a bit boring. But if we bake it together to a chocolate chip cookie, 0 calories, please, yummy. Thank you. Peace.